Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Aleksandra Sekula. I'm the Vice Director of Marketing Center at the University of Economics in Katowice. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you at the fourth edition of the event Economics Without Borders at our university. The aim of the project is to popularize science on international scale by organizing unique events with scientists from all over Europe and from all over the world. Ahead of us, there are 3 days of debates and motivational speeches. 2 days, today and tomorrow, are especially dedicated to our university students, and the third day on Friday is especially for high school students as well as general audience. The event is also transmitted online. During this event, we will have a chance to listen to interesting speeches by scientists from Romania, from Iraq, Czech Republic, as well as Polish universities. I would like to add that this project is co-financed by Silesian Metropolis. It's also being held as part of City Region Academy Band of the European City of Science, Katowice 2024. Before the announcement of first panel, I would cordially invite our Vice Rector, Professor Wojciech Dyduch, to say a few words and officially begin the event.
I prefer to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to open the 4th edition of the Economy Without Borders, the great event that is organized by the Metropolis GZM together with our university. Yesterday, when we found out that Donald Trump is getting more votes than his opponent, markets reacted. The dollar became stronger. And of course, this will affect our economy as well. So we could see very easily that economy has no borders. But it's not only about money, it's not only about currency exchange. The economy has no borders as it comes to human creativity, as it comes to innovation. Economy has no borders as it comes to inclusive green transformation of the region. It also has no borders as it comes to the impact it has on the environmental issues, corporate social responsibility that we can see basically every day when living here in the region of Silesia, when living here in Katowice. These are fascinating topics, and I'm very proud to welcome our keynote speakers that will tackle these and other matters in today's session. So let me welcome all of you, especially our professors, our distinguished professors, Mirosława Stępień from CE Bankwatch Network Poland. Hello, welcome. Michel Stapper from the Tilburg University in Netherlands. Hello. Łukasz Trębaczewski, Silesian University, Poland. Petr Rosenhal from Ostrava. Also our Czech guests, Professor Franciszek Zapletal, Karel Chlawaczek, and Grzegorz Sierpiński from Silesian University of Technology. Our scientist, Anna Urbanek, welcome as well. Welcome to the moderators of our sessions, Professor Julia Włodarczyk. Where's Julia? She disappeared, but she's coming. Marcin Baron. Monika Wieczorek-Kosmala. Also our guest professors who invited our international speakers here. So Marcin as well, Professor Ochojski, Artur Ochojski, hello. Professor Małgorzata Pańkowska, Professor Iwona Otola, and those who I haven't mentioned, that's of course my mistake, but welcome Professor Artur Strzelecki, who has just arrived. Welcome as well, okay? But most of all, welcome our wonderful students. Thanks for coming, and I hope you will enjoy the sessions today. I would like to officially open Economy Without Borders, and I wish you fruitful and borderless discussion. All the best.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now, as we officially started, it's time for our first session. The session is entitled Advocacy for an Inclusive Green Transition. This session is moderated by our Dr. Marcin Baron from our university. As our vice rector said, let me introduce the guest of this first panel, Dr. Mirosława Stępień, CE Bankwatch Network, Dr. Michel Stepper, assistant professor at the University of Amsterdam and Tilburg University, as well as Łukasz Trąbaczowski from Silesian University. The stage is yours.
Okay, for a short moment I will start from here, standing up, and then we'll join them. Welcome everybody to the panel. Good that you come. So we are very well fitted in the time slot of the next lecture. So happy to see also the students' faces and of course everybody mentioned by our vice rector. My guests have been introduced already, so no need to do it again. I will only say one thing, that the plan behind this panel was like this, that we have like 3 different perspectives, just to make you know what was my idea. And we have a, let's say, mostly research perspective that is represented by Michiel, who is sitting first to my right, who is doing research on the issues of climate policies and the governance concerning them and the social involvement in this, with experience not only in the Netherlands, but also with experiences with big horizon-financed project, like what is called Bolster, and also scholarships in the USA and in Japan. So happy to have you and more research perspective. Then we have like the more NGO or watchdog perspective. Not really? Yeah, practitioner perspective, pragmatic, policy-oriented Miłka. And last but not least, I also invited Dr. Łukasz Trąbaczowski. I invited Łukasz to have a comment from this region, because he is a sociologist based in this region, running many research concerning this region. So I hope we can mix it up and we will have the borderless, seamless and nice discussion. So we will start with like around 10 minutes introductions by Miłka and Michiel. Do you have any preference who I'm gonna start? Okay, so we'll start with Miłka with a practitioner approach. I will try to control the time at around 10 minutes, maximum 15 minutes, and then we go into panel discussion.
Hello, you can hear me. Okay. So I'm first. It's always great to be first because it can be nerve-wracking. But so first of all, I am not really linked or affiliated right now with any university. What I actually do is I work for an international NGO, which is called CE Bankwatch Network. So this is a network of environmental and climate NGOs from 14 countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And we actually do advocacy. I focus on the just transition and the energy transition. One of the countries I work on is Poland, but I also work on the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, the Western Balkans, and a lot of other countries. So Romania, I won't go into detail about the countries that we work on, but I will tell you about how we work and what advocacy is in practice. So I did give a definition at the beginning so that I can sort of go from this definition and then talk about what we actually do. So advocacy is the act of supporting a cause or a proposal. As I mentioned at the very beginning, CE Bankwatch Network is a non-governmental organization network. So it networks organizations from the 14 countries that we encompass. And our cause is pushing forward policy that has a positive impact on the environment, on mitigating and countering climate change, and on moving forward an approach that will support real social change, especially aimed at those that are the most vulnerable or underrepresented. So what we do is we try to influence decisions. We influence decisions in political, economic, and social institutions. I personally work on the EU level, so my main target is the European Commission and the European Parliament. But we cooperate with national level organizations within our network that target national and regional institutions. So decision makers are primarily politicians, but also civic servants within these institutions who decide what kind of legislation exists, how it is implemented, and where money goes. So we look at basically everything that impacts our lives. If you think politics doesn't influence you, you're very wrong. It influences you on every level. So that means that unless you start impacting the way that policy is introduced, you can't implement any change. Okay, so what do we do? So policy and legislative work, this means that we look at, let's say, some sort of climate legislation. At the EU level, this would be legislation linked to the European Green Deal. And we look at what the legislation actually says and what kind of change it will implement. And then we approach various decision makers and tell them, you know, this is not working. We participate in consultations. This is not going to actually solve the issues, or this is going to solve the issues and we support it, or we say that it isn't going to and we propose changes. So we actually really are one of the few I would say, participants in the whole discussion that really go in detail into the legislation, except for the people in the institutions themselves. Other people who also go into it are frequently researchers, but they don't often go into this next element, which is impacting policy. So they research what exists, but they need people like us to actually go and tell the institutions, look, the research has shown this and this. This is not working. You need to implement it in a different way. This is why increasingly our network very much focuses on reading research, on supporting research proposals that we think can implement change, and cooperating with research so that we have a way in which we can impact legislation. We try to impact policy based on evidence and facts. So this is why the work that is done by researchers is extremely important for us as well. We do a lot on improving participatory practices. What in practice this means is that we also invite people that we don't always agree with to come to various consultations. So in our opinion, it is important that anyone that legislation can impact is at the table and tries to impact change. So, I mean, I'm personally from a green environmental organization, but I have very frequently met, for example, with mining sector workers and employees and told them, you guys need to be at the table because they are making decisions without you. And just to give you a very practical example, 6 or 7 years ago when I began my work, the trade unions would not talk to us. They said, you are from the Green Movement, you are trying to close our jobs, so we will not talk with you. Right now, most trade unions talk with us. They also know that they will get evidence-based information from us and that we will support them to know what is going on so that they can also impact the process from the perspective of the needs that they have. So for us, participation is not about getting only our side to the table, it's getting anybody that can be impacted by the process. Participation is also very difficult because one of the most difficult things to do is getting the people that have difficulties participating, that don't have the knowledge that is necessary to participate. So a lot of what we do is capacity building. So capacity building is we go into the regions, we go to communities, and we try to tell them what is happening, how they can get involved, and to understand how they can impact this. Because going back to what I said at the beginning, there is no such thing as politics or policy that doesn't impact you directly. All policy ultimately impacts each of us citizens, and if we don't get involved, these decisions are made above our heads. So we try to make sure that the consultation processes really are proactive, not just sending out emails to a few people and asking, okay, can you have a look at this document, but actually getting approaching people that are not usually at the table and trying to explain to them how they can impact the process. We do advocacy on all levels, as I mentioned before, and one of the most important things we do is data collection and comparative analysis. So as I mentioned, I work on I work on about 8 countries in the EU and about 5 or 6 more outside of the EU in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. So we, based on the work that we do, we gather the information and we compare the situations in the different country, primarily in order to achieve, to see what's systemic. If something is systemic, it probably means the policy is being implemented badly. One example we have of this is actually something we did in cooperation with Michael Stapper, which is the Follow the Money series. So we looked at the policy, which was the Just Transition Fund. So this is a type of fund that is also used in Silesia. So maybe Łukasz can say something about that later. So it is funded. We looked at the policy itself, the plan for spending the money, and then we looked at where the money actually goes. So looking where it was allocated. And through this, we could see that some of the issues with how it is being spent was actually systemic, and it was repeated in all of the countries, which means that there was a problem with the policy that was implemented at the EU level. And then we can find that problem and we can advocate for changes in such funding. A lot of our work is about facilitating and bringing voices forward, so amplifying the voices of people who are not usually involved in such work. But, if you see that a group of society is being impacted by the green policy, but nobody is listening to them, one of the few groups that will actually listen to them and try to get them heard will be NGOs. I'm not saying, there is a wide variety of NGOs, and many of them are the only people who are amplifying voices of, vulnerable groups or underrepresented groups. I think the rest of this is more or less, I don't know how much time I have left, Marcin, so.
Still around 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, so how successful are we? And why do we need advocacy? I think is what I would like to end with. Most of the policy at the EU level and at the national level even now, is mainly implemented by people who have power and money. So this means that a lot of the policy is and has for decades been implemented mainly by large corporations, people who have the most money and who are, the highest position of power, frequently not to support community development, social issues, the environment, or the climate, which is why we are in a very bad spot right now in terms of the climate and environment. I think very bad, I would say something more direct, but I don't think it's the right venue. We are in a very poor position in terms of the climate. According to a recent report by WWF, the 1.5 degree target of the Paris Agreement will be passed in 2030, and we have about 5 years to react. In fact, globally, carbon emissions are not going down, and we are not going fast enough with reacting to climate change. So advocacy of the type that we do is probably the strongest form of impacting policy that we have right now. And against us NGOs have huge lobbyists from various corporations. So this is not easy work. This is work in which I have received various threats and in which my colleagues have received various threats. Because I work on energy, so I work on something that is considered part of the security of every country. So advocacy is extremely difficult work, extremely important work, and it really, really does impact economy, because I do have examples of moments where I have impacted legislation through the collaborative cooperation of many, many NGOs across the whole of Europe, so that the legislation actually answers some of the requests that we have in terms of environment, climate, and social issues. I recently blocked a 120 million euro project that would have destroyed the rivers in quite a large part of Poland. So it is possible to impact, but it requires quite a lot of perseverance, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of support from various, spaces, including researchers, because I need the research that is brought from various universities in order to show, look, these are the facts, this is the evidence, this is how policy is impacting, and this is what you guys need to change. So thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you also for doing the research that you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milka, and also thank you for this very nice summary showing the risks, but also the potentials behind your activity. I do hope there are no threats towards you here in this room, at least not from the panel, but you said that I was like a little bit teasing the research society that we need to go more from knowing to being impactful. So I wanted to introduce this way Michiel's speech, how to move from knowledge to impact.
Yeah, thank you, Martin, also for the invitation to speak here. I'm Michiel Stapper. I'm an assistant professor working at the University of Amsterdam and Tilburg University, and I'm going to talk about a research project. Your university is also part of this research project, and I work with Martin, but also Monica and Arthur, about something called the Just Transition. So our project is called Bolster, and what we do is with 11 different partners, we do research in 7 so-called Just Transition regions. But first I'm going to give a little bit of a background about what a Just Transition is and why it's important. So in the 2010s, you had a lot of climate demonstrations all across the world. There was a lot of anger vis-à politicians that they were not taking any climate action. And it put a lot of pressure on politicians. So in 2015, finally, there was a climate Paris Agreement that forced or strongly stimulated countries to make plans to become climate neutral by 2050. And a lot of countries started to design these kind of plans. Also Macron in France, and he came up with the gas tax and a whole environmental plan. And how did it end it? Like this. There were demonstrations in Paris, you had the Yellow Vest movement. People were really angry because everyday people saw their prices rises, the living costs were going up, and they were angry about it. So when the European Green Deal was designed, one principle became really important, the principle of leave no one behind, and that the idea that the transition towards climate neutrality should not only be like environmentally well designed, but also a just transition. So the just transition was being announced. And the just transition is a concept that originates from the labor movement in the US and Canada. And it's the idea that social and environmental concerns should be joined, and that together they can be created a strong movement. A climate transition is okay as long as the people that might lose their jobs are compensated, either by reskilling and upskilling towards new jobs, or by the creation of other jobs. So the European Commission, in order to make sure that the most disadvantaged people are not left behind, created this just transition mechanism, which is around 20 billion euros in direct funding and 55 billion in private funding into regions that have a high concentration of carbon-intensive industries. So the steel industry, cement industry, but also coal mining, and the area around Katowice is also one of those just transition regions. Authorities needed to create the so-called territorial just transition plans, which are plans that are some kind of framework about how these regions will develop new economic opportunities, but also ensure that the transition towards climate neutrality is just. And funding from the Just Transition Fund can be targeted at boosting SMEs, so small, medium-sized enterprises, but also investment in research and education, mobility, retrofitting of buildings, rehabilitation of brownfields, which is of course really important also in coal mining regions, the retraining of workers and job seekers, but also social care, elderly care, child care and inclusion. So all these regions did make these plans, and there were investments. And what we did in Bolster is we started to ask different vulnerable groups in those regions, so for example Roma groups, but also old workers in the coal industry, women, youth, how do you think about a just transition and what would be a just transition according to you? And we did this in 7 regions, and this is an example of an interview that we did with somebody from Stara Zagora in Bulgaria. And the person said, well, my goal right now is to go to Germany because I want to build a house or buy a house, but currently there is no job that can give me an income by which I can afford a house. So the only way forward was to leave Bulgaria, go to Germany, get there a job, and go into to buy a house in Bulgaria. It really shows that in some of those regions the challenges are really big and people don't see any chance of staying there. Another example from Charleroi in Belgium, where they say, well, this used to be a very vibrant city. It's also in the coal and steel region. And they said, well, there were like 9 different cafes here. But like in the last 20, 30 years, all those cafes closed down. This really shows that the current just transition is not one of, not like the new transition, but a lot of these regions have been going to deindustrialization and transitions for decades. And the living conditions in this kind of regions are really going downhill. So that creates, of course, a lot of unrest. And a last example of an interview done in Katowice, where a person said, well, there's also a lot of depopulation in the area, buildings are being left out, but you also have an increased elderly population. So why no investments in turning some of those abandoned buildings into elderly care? So these are some of the concerns that people have in these regions. Lack of housing, lack of job opportunities, and also lack of social care such as elderly care. And if we have a critical look at the plans that are being developed, you see that most of the investments of the just transition are going into boosting small, medium-sized industries or subsidizing large corporations to decarbonize. Which means that a lot of these needs of the most vulnerable people in regions are not being met by the money that is invested in the regions. And I think this is a missed opportunity, because I also think that if we want to break through the pattern in Europe, where you see some regions in Northwest Europe that are economically really strong, that are often like in the center of supply chains, and if we want to break that through, we have to have a new understanding about how to build economies. And I think that new understanding really begins by also building up social infrastructure in different regions so that people have the opportunity to start a business. And now the current thinking in a lot of European cohesion funds is no, it starts with funding SMEs, and then those benefits will trickle down to the people. But I think it should be the other way around, invest in the people, and then they will start SMEs, and that's not currently how it's going. I also have some explanations about what's interesting, that what I said in the beginning, it was like the response to the French climate plans was the Yellow Vest movement, so a lot of unrest. And the way we talk also about climate change is often, I think, not really guided to the people, the most vulnerable people. So policymakers, academics like me, we talk about climate change in terms of carbon emissions. We have to decrease the carbon emissions. It's a very technical study. But also through our interviews, we see that people think about climate change, but in different grammars than we used to. Again, Stadas Agora. This person was not very concerned about climate change, but the person was very concerned that the way they sold fruit and vegetables changed because the seasons were changing, so the harvests were changing. Another example from Charleroi. Again, climate change, it sounds like a problem that's important to academics and like higher educated people, but this person was very concerned about the quality of water and air in the region. And again, in Katowice, where persons were being interviewed, didn't care a lot about climate change, but they cared about decreasing their costs. So they were interested in insulation of their houses and maybe getting some solar panels or heat pumps. So they didn't spend that much money on energy. And I think this implication is if we start talking about decreasing carbon emissions, but and start talking about decreasing pollution or saving you money, that there is a lot of support for climate politics. So maybe the recommendations I will skip. But what I think is really important is if you design policies that intervene in the economy, really try to understand the people that might benefit from it. And this is not only possible through surveys. I know numbers are amazing because you can generalize, but talk with the people, ask them through qualitative research how they see the world, and I think we can design more effective policies through it.
Thank you so much, Michiel. And obviously we are going to go back to the policy issues because both of you mentioned them, but also both of you talked really a lot about how people can be involved and in general on conveying this green message or climate policies. And right now I'm starting like a 50-minute discussion. We will of course discuss between you, but if some of you would like to intervene, to join, to ask, to do whatever, just either raise your hands when we switch the panelists, or maybe I will be walking around a little bit with the microphone. But let's start with the panelists, and I wanted to start with Łukasz, so our, let's say, regional rapporteur or regional observer. And what Milka said is that climate policy is in a kind of a trap right now because of different reasons. And also Michiel said that we need new understanding. So my question would be, for a warm-up of the panel, How do we, in general, convey the green message? How it happen? How does it happen in this region? How do we reach those who are left behind? The process, the discussion in general. What is your perspective like? Bridging the global or European perspective with what you see in the region in your research?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. And I'm a sociologist, and for sociologists, very important is the sociological imagination, we call it. So it's bridging the general changes or the challenges on the general level and the, well, problems of the everyday people. Yeah, so what they come across in the everyday life. And we have to look at our region like in a perspective, not that transition that's going on now, but this process of transition is already going 30 years in this region. And for many people, there is no big change between those two. I would like to pinpoint how tricky is the just transition name in this context. Because, well, if it's just transition, if we propose just transition, it means, well, so previously it was unjust, yeah, so that's what really people perceive, that the previous transitions, when the previous transition was unjust. This transition made under the economic restructuring portfolio, yeah. So, those changes have already generated many cases of people left behind, and I would like to just give some glimpses of this. First, this region attracted, in the 80s and 70s, attracted young men from all over Poland to work in mines. When in the early 90s, the layoffs from the mines started, they were first to get fired. They were living in workers' hotels, so many of them went back to their home regions, but some of them well, were ashamed to come back, like being a failure. So they stayed in the region, but losing the job, they also lost the accommodation. So they became the first homeless here. And many of the people homeless now here have the background starting in the early 90s. And I think everyone here can name some districts of our towns, well, that have accumulated social problems, that some social dysfunctions can be named there. And many of those districts are post-coal mining districts and post-steelworks districts. And they are labeled as pathologic. Yeah, so in our research, we see that people just embrace this label and say, okay, you call us pathology, we will make it our name. So we will show you what pathology really means. So we will just put it into extremes. And so this exclusion goes on a spatial level, on social level. And if we look at these people, they well, they self-isolated. They don't vote, so they get no attention from politicians because there is no political capital to win on it. So this becomes a vicious circle. These areas are really forgotten. Yeah. Yeah?
So is there any way of, or even is there any sense of addressing them, like, for example, with big green policies, climate policies, going to them, preaching a little bit about this, or does it make any sense? Are there any hints that people can use on this?
I think they are instrumentalized really in this policy, because we did research together with our German, Greek and Estonian colleagues on narratives, and this pro-coal agenda narratives instrumentalize those people, like being well, a danger that if we follow this green agenda, you will end up like this. So they are just used as with a warning for what can happen. So unless we will do something with those who already suffered under the transition earlier, I think we will be always like driving the old path that we have followed before. So that's still very difficult to convince the others if they are scared to share the same fate.
Michael, would you see the same in your research, like across Europe or in Japan or in the US? Would you see the same, like instrumentalization of those communities or thing like that?
For sure.
I think it works, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so in the US I haven't explored that much in depth yet, and I think because of yesterday's elections, I think that research project is cancelled. But well, in Japan, they are now busy with like becoming climate neutral in Japan, really focused only on industrial policy. So they want to protect their steel industry, they want to protect their car industry, so they don't really care that much about.
And in the Netherlands, like, which is kind of a melting pot societally?
So in the Netherlands, what you see is that, and I completely agree, it's a little bit like an upper class business. So what you have also in the green policies in the Netherlands, you have tax deductions if you buy an electrical vehicle. So the Netherlands had like, is the country with the highest amount of Teslas in the world. You also see it with solar panels. The Netherlands is the country in Europe with the most solar panels on private houses, but they're all middle and upper class people that profit from it. And if you live in social housing, your energy costs go up and you don't profit from climate change. And I think that's a problem, and I think we should also not be afraid to frame climate policies in, you can benefit from it, your cost can go down, but we have to design policies in that way. And I think it's really important.
Okay, Milka, you already mentioned that there is a strong pressure, strong tension by the large corporate sector, which is a kind of obvious thing, of course. Then we have the upper class or middle class who is somehow involved. Yes, and then we come back to those who might be instrumentalized, as Łukasz said. In your work, do you feel there is a space, a room for talking to these people, for getting them involved? How do you do this? Or how do you work with them not to get labeled as those who also instrumentalize them?
I mean, we talk with everyone.
Okay.
We talk with everyone because we consider that everyone should have a space at the table, and I think this is something I mentioned. But I agree very much with, because if you throw slogans like climate change or environment or Green Deal or whatever, you're not really having a conversation. So what I always say in any venue that I am in is go and talk to the people in the regions where you are implementing the policy. So I say this at the European Commission level. I tell them, you guys are stuck here in Brussels, you don't go to these regions, you don't know what's happening. So if you want to implement this kind of change, because it is a huge change that is planned over the next 30 years, it's going to change everything, basically, from agriculture, so what we eat, how we travel, how we get energy, how we heat. Everything is going to be changed within the next 30 years, and has to be changed, in fact. If you're implementing this policy and the only people you're talking with are those who have the most power and money in Brussels behind closed doors, you will not see what's happening in the regions. I think we need to talk with everyone. So, I mean, and then the narrative. When I sit down with someone, I don't use the slogans. I ask them what is happening for them, what they are most afraid of. You know, what do they see as the biggest risk or challenge for them? What do they need in order to get on board with this change? Do they feel that their needs are being addressed? And we don't ignore these voices, we repeat them later elsewhere. We try to increase their possibilities and knowledge so that they can push for what they need to change. So, you know, I mean, we primarily work with small NGOs in the local and regional level because these are usually the most active citizens in a region. And we try to build their capacities so that they can impact national level decisions and international level decisions. So we take those people and we bring them to Brussels and tell them, okay, this is a forum where you can say what you want. You know, we help them to also frame it in a way so that it'll be understood in Brussels, because Brussels is a bubble. I'm sorry to say, but it is a bubble. You know, those people stay in Brussels and they talk in slogans. And we need, and I mean, one of the reasons we've been so impactful is because we are bringing this voice from the regions. So I agree, you talk about, you know, how is the agriculture, you know, how is the weather? If you're talking with a farmer, you ask them, you know, how's the weather, how is it impacting your harvests? If you're talking to a miner, you know, ask them about, you know that you will be losing your job in a while, you know, what do you think about that? How are you preparing for it? What do you need to support you? Do you feel that you're getting what you need? So this is really about real conversations, and I think one of the biggest problems of today's world is we don't have the real conversations. There's a lot of polarization, which is instrumentalization of people, you know, like saying, pitting people against each other. I mean, we were frequently the ones that other groups were being pitted against. You know, the environmentalists. We are the evil guys who are doing something bad. But once I sat in room, I come from a mining family, so this is quite important. I am from Konin, which is a lignite mining region. My father was a mining engineer. My uncle worked in the energy sector. I know these people. I grew up with them. I grew up as part of a mining community. So when I talk with the miners in my region, these are frequently my friends from high school. And, you know, and they have told me, I remember a couple of years ago, one of my friends came up to me and he said, you know, Miuka, I know I'm gonna lose my job. I know that we need to change. I agree with you about climate change. This was, of course, in a private conversation. And he said, I understand this, but this is my livelihood, and I'm afraid. I don't know what we're going to do next. And that is an open conversation between people. It's building society. It's talking about what different groups need. If you have an open conversation, you can implement change. So, thank you.
Of course, I know the answer will be somewhere in the shades of grey, but just for, you know, teasing. Is it easier to speak to the big lobbyists or to find narrations to those who are left behind? Which job is easier to be done?
They're different. Lobbyists are very suave. They are people who you have to be very cunning when talking to them, or you have to be very prepared. So they're not difficult to talk to. They're very, you know, charming usually. So they're lovely people to talk to usually. They have a lot of knowledge and it's quite easy. It's more difficult to talk with the people on the ground because these are frequently people who have been hurt by the system in some way, who you want to help and you can't help easily. So I think this is difficult, not because they are not people that are easy to talk with. They're frequently very easy people to talk with. But for an empath like me, I frequently feel emotionally impacted by such conversations. And I think about them at night.
Okay,
you know.
So then you need to discharge it. Okay, maybe somebody from the auditory would like to ask a question or comment upon something? I'm asking both students, professors, the visitors. Okay, I'm joining you with a microphone soon.
Thank you for taking questions. So you mentioned that I've read about the Just Transitioning project a few times, since it impacts my country as well. My general question was, the technology that's supposed to reduce us to zero carbon by 2050, it's not developed yet. With that said, what is changing, or what's the difference between you and other NGOs or organizations for that matter that get co-opted by businesses, since there's a lot of stakeholders in just transitioning? We have governments, we have countries, we have a lot of people in that. What makes you different from them by, let's say, if you came to Poland, you're like, we need to change everything here, we need to make this place really great, but we have to shut down all mining. Like, that's obviously going to create a massive problem. And how do we solve that by not having the technology? Like, it's a great dream that everybody on the planet can be safe, but there are no genuine solutions to it. As you said yourself, people in Brussels are in a bubble. Like, as the disconnect between the population and the politicians have never been higher than it is now. Look at the US, look at most European countries taking a wild swing to the right. Like, the disconnect between people and the politicians. So how would you go to a local miner who left, let's say my grandfather, left school early to go to a decorating job, like gardener? He never finished high school. How would you approach him and say, you know what, your job is harming the environment, you should do this instead? The man is 60 years old. How would you take an entire generation and reschool them, I guess that's a proper word, into, for the betterment of the environment, for a technology we yet do not have?
I think it was addressing Milka, but we can also...
the Middle East, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm guessing UK, because you didn't say which country you're from.
I'm Danish, sorry.
Danish, okay. All right. We are in a difficult moment. So, I mean, to answer you, the NGO sector is very broad. I represent my organization. I can tell you about what I do. I can't really talk about other NGOs. Also, some NGOs are infiltrated, or they are so-called gongos. I don't know if you know what a gongo is, which is government organized NGOs or corporate organized NGOs. So there's NGOs that are not really NGOs. So there's a lot of different things that are out there, and it complicates the whole image. I would say, yeah, I keep wanting to say that, you know, we are in a very difficult position at this moment, okay? We know we have to implement change. It's an extremely complex change, and we don't have all of the technologies. I agree with you. Some of the proposals that are going forward right now don't even make sense, either from the economic perspective or the social perspective or the financial perspective or technological perspective. An example of this is hydrogen, or, you know, carbon capture and storage. So these are technologies that are proposed that, you know, from various analysis, will not actually allow for the transition for a variety of reasons. I won't go into them. We can talk about it later if you want. So we are in a bit of a difficult situation. To be very honest, what we need to do is we need to lower our consumption. We need to use less. We need to really talk about a different style of our societies. And nobody's ready to do that. And this is the whole issue. Because it would be achievable with the technologies that we have if we started downsizing. But none of us are ready to do that. And I'm worried that by the time we realize this is the only option, it's going to be too late. But we'll see in a couple of years. So, I mean, I constantly have this issue because I work on policy. So I'm considered a representative of a moderate organization. We don't go out into the streets to protest. We work on policy. But I read all the climate information, and it isn't looking good. Policy takes time to implement. We don't have that time. So my answer to your question is we need to speed up. We need to speed up with what we have, and we need to be ready for huge changes, because if we don't implement those changes by choice, we won't have that choice, and it'll be a much worse scenario. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I did try to.
If you want to add something to this, Michiel or Łukasz, do you want to add? Go on.
Yeah, I will go in a little bit of a different direction, I think. So I've done research in Japan. I said in Japan they don't really care about climate change, but they do care about the global economy. And they are implementing climate policies now because they know the future economy is going to be more or less climate neutral. The last 4 years of Biden were huge investments in climate technologies, climate policies. Businesses have adapted their business models because of those policies. The European Commission has done the same. I think that Trump will get rid of some of the policies, but a lot of those CEOs don't want to change their business models again or their investments. So I think this is going to stay important, like climate neutral policies. Also, Elon Musk is going to be a special advisor. So I think for the business sector, climate neutrality will stay important. Why is this important? Because an example from the Netherlands, we have a huge steel factory in IJmuiden. We call it Tata Steel. The owner is Tata. Tata Steel doesn't want to produce climate neutral steel. But they also saw the world changing, so they thought, okay, we're going to invest in carbon capture technology. And in that way, we will deal with it. Then the workers in that steel industry, so these are workers that have been working for years in the steel industry. They are not higher educated, they are technical people, but they are not progressives that care a lot about climate change. They went on a strike. Why did they went on a strike? Because they also saw that the world is changing, and they said, if we are not going to decarbonize in a serious way, we will lose our jobs. So they also told me, Michiel, this is not a romantic story. We care about our jobs. And I think this should be a change in climate policies. Really try to understand the life world of the worker, and then understand, oh, maybe this person cares about saving their job. Or if you go into other communities, they don't care about climate change, but they do care about the quality of air or water. So we need to change the language, and then you can create way more support. And I think you can also convince some of the workers that have been working for years in those industries that there is something to benefit from the transition. I think it's really important.
One thing I wanted to mention, a 60-year-old miner would no longer be working. So in Poland, for example, it's, I think 50 is the retirement age for miners.
Even younger.
So that's
in
one
hard
of the...
coal mining, it's even younger. Łukasz, do you want to add to this discussion?
Yeah, but really translating it into regional perspective,
Yeah, of course.
it doesn't have any universal. It doesn't have a universal message here, because this is a region that is digging coal for 200 years now. So everything that was profitable to explore, we did it earlier. So now we are really scratching the leftovers. And if I would have to ask or talk with a miner, I did a lot of interviews with miners, so I can imagine the situation. I would say your grandfather was digging it at the level of 200 meters below the surface. Your father, 600 meters below surface. You are digging it at the 1,000 meter below surface. It's no much more deeper we can go. So it's, I would say, just the green agenda can be really something we should jump on in our own interest, because if it brings money to the region, like Just Transition Fund money, it can cover the costs of transition we will eventually have to go, also out of simply economical reasons. And so in this case, it's not like what my colleagues presented, but I think for the region, we can see it not as a threat, but also as a change, as a chance.
Can I just add something to that, Łukasz? When one of the first visits to Silesia, I think was in 2016 or 15, I had a lecture, I'm not going to say by which institution, but already then they, the man who was doing the lecture provided a complete timeline of the closures of the mines in Silesia. So this was known, and it was in different presentations, you know, material, papers, because everyone knew that economically and from the perspective of the available resources, you know, Silesia has a limited time span. But what you hear in the news is not evidence, is not data. It's what's politically popular or politically polarizing, I would say. So again, it's an instrumentalization. So, you know, if you're an expert, I mean, I generally, when I read the media, at this point, I know why something was said, I know it's not true, and I know who wanted it to be said in this way. And this is pretty scary, that you don't get real information from a lot of the news, especially connected to energy. And to mining and things like that. So if in 2016 they already had, you know, and pretty much everything was to be closed by, I think, 2040, if I remember correctly. And in the official documentation in Poland, they're talking about closing mines in 2049. So there is an issue about what is being told to the miners as well. It is unfair to the miners. It is something we try to tell them about. They won't listen to, about it from us. But it is evidence that they need to hear. So that's one thing, and I think I'll finish with that.
Yeah, that's the question about the coal resources or the coal resources being accessible. Two different things and two different things in narration building. Any other voices from the auditory? Questions, remarks? If not, oh yes, please, I go to you. But you need to help also. Okay, so we start with the colleague there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to start with that as my colleague, my grandfather also was a miner, so I come from a family that, well, has history with that, and I know the industry to some extent, and I wanted to ask you a question that maybe is more technical. I don't expect the technical answer because I am not a mining engineer myself, but you cannot just close the minery. You have to, well, let's say, keep it conservated. I'm sorry if it's not the word, but you have to take care of the ventilation. You cannot just, you know, say it's closed, let's forget it. It never happened. And the reason why I'm asking is that you don't really hear a conversation about that. And well, some of my family members work in an industry related to that, and I know myself that it is very challenging and expensive and difficult. And the miners know that. The people who work in such industry are aware of that, and well, they also hear that it is not really talked about. Maybe it is mentioned behind the closed doors. But well, I believe that we have to have this conversation, and it is necessary. And well, basically, my question would be whether how would you challenge such obstacles? And I just want to clarify that I agree that, well, the age of coral is gone. We have to adjust. So that's my question.
Yeah, and technically this also relates to lignite digging as well. So I think all of you who would like to contribute, you can do it. And in the meantime, I'm putting a colleague here on a queue.
Okay, so maybe I will try, because everyone, well, it became ritual to say that people had miners in a family. Well, my father was miner, my both grandfathers were miners, and a couple of my uncles were miners. So it's also close to me. So I would say mine is not a factory that you just close down the line, shut up the door, turn off the light and it's gone. Mine is living long after its closure. So we have two closures of the mine. Closure of the extraction and closure of the functioning. So these are completely different things. And it also have some legal issues like what can be supported, what can be the funds used, because, well, you can get EU funds for closure. So from this money you can also, up to a point, finance the process of the closure after it stops extracting, but you cannot support a mine that still extracts coal. And there is a lot of issues, technical issues, not going too much into detail. First, it would be equipment. Part of this equipment can be reused, not everything, but part of it can be reused. So usually before the mine is getting closed, the people employed there are already taking out the equipment that can be reused in other mines that are still functioning. Second, there is a problem of water, because that's the biggest problem in our mines. So we have still areas where the mine is already closed and we are pumping water. We are pumping water out of the mines that were closed in the beginning of the 20th century, like zinc and manganese ore mines in Biton. So we are pumping it because below there, the mine is the coal mine that would be flooded if we would not do it. The issue is like all the region, all the biggest extracting cities in region are subsiding. So we can name or point places in our region that are at the risk of flooding. I talked with the engineers of the mining and they said no one can really predict where the water would flow and where it would go up to the surface if we would stop pumping. So this environmental cost and real money cost to keep it later on is something we will have to bury on whatever will happen. So we will go with later on. It's part of this heritage we can't get rid of. And this last thing is subsiding of the terrain that happen after the mine gets closed. Because when the mine is operating and there are subsidings, you can try to get the money back from the mine, some money for repair. But after it gets closed, there is no one to ask for. So this is also the justice dimension of the transition. Who will really cover the costs after we will step out of, will we pass over the curve?
Yes, so what Łukasz pinpointed shows us that it is not only about the technical issues, which was really great to be asked about, but also about the time span and about the responsibility for the process. So I think we can all, and it is also relevant to all the carbon-related industries. So I think we can extend this question to all the panel members, like being in this kind of, let's say, spirit or narration.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would bring it to the economic aspects, since we are at the economics conference. What you can probably learn also in your economics classes is that until quite recently, the indirect costs or expenses of various activities were not really taken into account. This is actually something that was introduced, for example, by green economics. So what are indirect costs? Indirect costs of I don't know, a corporation's activities are, for example, the environmental costs, the health costs, recultivation costs, all of that. So it has been taken into account to some extent, but actually one of the things that has changed most in recent years is that this has been increased, that we have started looking at, okay, so you have, I don't know, an energy plant that is functioning, it is making this and this profits, but is it really paying for all of the damage that it is doing? For example, on air pollution, in terms of air pollution, on the health of its citizens. And we know that to a large extent it isn't, right? So this is an answer to your question, that this is something that policy is changing right now. We are looking increasingly at the indirect costs. So one of the things that is looked at is the polluter pays principle. This is a principle that was introduced at the EU level. So this means that theoretically companies or corporations that pollute in various ways should have money set aside to pay the environmental and health costs that they incur.
Milka, very briefly, because we started from coal mining, which are the other sectors that are, for you as fighting for the change, the most challenging or the most involved maybe?
The most challenging sectors, the gas sector is a very challenging one. Energy production generally in various forms that are based on fossil fuels. So in Poland we have coal, but a lot of the coal, there is a huge push right now to switch into gas, which is, from the climate perspective, even worse than carbon emissions, because methane emissions very quickly speed up the negative impacts of various emissions into the air. So the climate change will actually be sped up if we switch to gas. But no one talks about this yet. So we've been quite successful in sort of showing the negative impacts of basing our energy sectors on coal, but it's still a fight to show that gas is also a problem.
Yeah, let's give it an even more international dimension. Michiel, is there something to comment upon these externalities or time span from your perspective?
I don't know, like an international perspective, but I do know, like, there is funding also from the European Commission, of course, to rehabilitate this polluted land. I know that for some East European countries, it's really difficult because, for example, in a region in Romania, Prahova, there's a lot of oil industry. The oil industry went bankrupt. Nobody knows where the owners are, and this land is very polluted. But without the owners, you cannot apply for the EU funding, so it becomes really complicated. And I think that's in general for the Just Transition Fund. It's great that's there. There's enough money, but often it's not spent really well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And we will not be able to get another question, but there is one question on the queue. So colleagues sitting there, please go on.
Okay, so thank you for the microphone. I would ask one question on the international level. So I'm going to ask about the economic security of European Union. So I'm all for the green change because I know we need to adapt to save the earth and also to save us and the economics. But I know that the change till the 2050 would also put us into a stagnation, I think economic stagnation, because it always people lose jobs and it takes about 5 to 10 years, maybe more, to people finding new jobs, learning new things, to find another jobs and changing from the coal mines and for the fossil fuels to the green energy. I know we have still 30 years, but I think it will be stagnation in the economy. Wouldn't this leave us behind the China and Russia, who doesn't follow the same exact principles as us, and will be dependent on these two countries who will grow to the economic hegemony, and the sacrifices we are willing to sacrifice, will be lost, just because they will be starting producing more on the fossil fuels and more on coal, for example. We know that China are trying to open about 40 or 50 new coal mines just to rush their economy. So wouldn't leave us with like security problems in the near future?
If I can answer quickly, and then you can go into more detail. Well, one of the issues actually for Europe is that we didn't get on board fast enough. Because, for example, in PVs, we are losing out right now in the market to China. Because we didn't develop our, various companies that could have taken over the market. So we're actually not doing it fast enough, not too fast. I would say that the industrial deal is actually going to try and reply to this, but the change is happening. We actually took too long also from the economic perspective. So, of course, my objectives are environmental and social, but from the economic perspective, we need to speed up the transition, and primarily we need to make sure that the production of green technologies is taking place in Europe and not in China. So this is what we need to do right now. So you need to look at heat pumps being produced in Europe at an affordable price. You need to look at PVs being produced in Europe at an affordable price. So even if you don't look at it from the environmental or climate perspective, economically it really makes sense to start investing really quickly into this and making sure the companies are here and not in China.
Michael, is it easier said than done, or not?
Well, it's maybe easier said than done, but like to talk about China, they will hit their carbon peak next year or the year thereafter, which means that they will not produce more carbon emissions than the years before, which is earlier than the EU or the US or any country that's strongly industrializing. Why are they doing this? They're doing this because the cities are very polluted, right? And they also know that they want to go towards like a more advanced economy. They needed to have some strategic industries that they were really good at. So 20, 30 years ago, they come up with the plans. We will become the world leaders in solar panels, electrical vehicles, and batteries. Currently, they are. In terms of batteries that are needed for electrical vehicles, I think 90% of the batteries come from China. The electrical vehicles like BYD, it's now next to Tesla the most valuable car producer in the world, whereas like Volkswagen needs to close factories. So the benefit of an undemocratic system like China is that they can have a long-term vision and a goal, and then the economic growth can be planned. So I agree with Milka. Probably European Green Deal was started too late. And yes, there will be stagnation maybe, but I think what would be a really big mistake is now saying, okay, we don't do all these green investments anymore. Because again, what I said, business models are now directed towards this goal, and changing that will lead to less innovation, less investments. And we now need to double down. And actually you can also become very competitive in certain areas, like batteries is really needed, but maybe difficult to catch up with China. But wind turbines and also sustainable fuel for example, aviation, that are some sectors that European Commission could really embrace, and EU could become world leader. So,
thank you. Łukasz, do you want to add something to this?
Just, well, one thing about China, because I was comparing different regions, coal mining regions, and Hardin region is, well, like Chinese Silesia. And if you look at China, you have to think about the economy of scale. Because if you look at the data of the coal mining extraction all over years, it's rising, 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 and in 2013 there's a jump. And this small jump, which means a couple of hundreds of millions of tons, is just closure, is a Chinese reform of mining. They just closed those 100-something unprofitable mines in one year. So if we are looking at it from our region perspective, we have 17 mines 30 years ago. We still have 17 mines now, and they did it in 1 year, 100 mines are gone. So that's the pace if you don't have to look at the social cost. So no one really paid attention. What will happen to those people who were really in this region? So Hardin is a rust belt of China now. And I think that regional authorities have completely no idea what to do with the region later on, yeah? So.
Yeah. I think we are starting a discussion on the difference between efficient and just transition, which is probably a subject for another panel or another research and books, and of course also about the social costs of it. Okay, so I wanted to thank you for this, but to wrap up this panel, I wanted you to dream a little bit, but not to over-dream, not to get over-enthusiastic. If, like, for your final input, you could share your idea or share your really a little dream in your work, like with the society in the region, in your environmental advocacy, in your being present in different places across the world and sharing your research. What would be either a good practice that you would like, that we would be happy to see being scaled up or implemented in many places, or even if it is not a best practice, so what would be your perfect situation you would like to see, like a dream-based scenario? If you could keep within 1 minute or 1 minute and a half, it would be more than perfect. I see Miłka is willing to start.
Yeah, I would like policymakers, both at the national and international level, to have to, before they implement any policy, to have to go into a community where this policy will be most impactful, or which it won't impact at all because it's badly prepared. And they have to spend a day there and then explain to these people the policy that they're introducing and how it will impact them. This is what I would like to see, sort of like a requirement. Before you introduce policy, go into one of these communities that you will impact through this policy. Spend a day, spend a week there, and see whether your policy really makes sense. This is my dream.
Nice experiments. Michiel?
So I don't know the case in detail, but what I've heard in Denmark, the shipbuilding industry went bankrupt, and they were very successful in transitioning towards creation of wind turbines and really embracing the technical skill of all these workers in these carbon-intensive industries and growing new industries. I think that's a really good practice. And then on top of that, maybe I'm dreaming too much and I'm not really detailed, and maybe not small scale, but I would like to see Polish solar panel companies, and I want to see like Hungarian electrical vehicles, because right now what you see is the most advanced green technology all come from the Netherlands, Germany, and I think we really need to change that pattern as well. And there is money to do that.
Thank you, and Łukasz.
Okay, my dream is down to earth. I would like to see making use of what we already have, because I think we need to work with the communities, and we have a trained personnel in that, the social workers. While for many municipalities, social work is treated only as a cost. And those are people who can really reach those people and are trained to work with them. So I think we are not using our assets enough. So I would like to see putting more attention to those people who are underpaid, overworked, and really undervalued.
Yeah, so it is also about recognition, and that's another story, and that's another panel we might have, but still we have at least like 2 or 3 new subjects for new panels, so hopefully we might be once invited again here or to any other place, but because there are another panels waiting, and because maybe some of the students would like to switch to another lectures because of the timetable and schedule at the university, I need to stop here. I would really like to thank you all the panelists, and I hope you just give a big hand to them. Miłosława Stępień from CNTI Bank Watch Network, Michiel Stapper, University of Amsterdam, and Łukasz Trębaczowski, University of Silesia. Thank you so much. It was a big pleasure to be with you this afternoon already. Okay, enjoy the break and enjoy the next parts of the Economics Without Borders. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is time for a new panel debate entitled Economics for Ecology, Social Impact. I would like to welcome all participants, students, our panelists. Our debate will look like this. First, I will introduce our panelists, make a short introduction to the discussion, and then we will have 2 rounds of questions to our panelists, and we will leave some time for questions from the audience. So if you are curious in the topic of economics for ecology, social impact, listen carefully and write down your questions. Okay, dear panelists, once again, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. It's a great pleasure to have you here today with us. And starting from my far left, we have Professor Grzegorz Sierpiński, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Transport and Aviation Engineering of the Silesian University of Technology. He is also the head of the Department of Transport Systems, Traffic Engineering and Logistics. He's an author and co-author of more than 300 scientific papers and chapters or books. He edited several monographs. He coordinated the priority research area of the Silesian University of Technology, Smart Cities and Mobility of the Future. His professional experience includes also more than 20 contract works in the field of transportation. He managed several projects, and his research interests refer to road traffic engineering, including traffic analysis and forecasting, modeling of transport systems, and optimization of transport networks, together with shaping travel behaviors in cities. Then, so we can welcome him. We have Anna Urbanek, who is assistant professor at the Department of Transport, University of Economics in Katowice. She specializes in urban transport economics and sustainable mobility in cities, as well the impact of information and communication technologies on the transport sector. She is the author of numerous publications and research papers and projects, they refer, among others, to pricing policies in urban and regional public transport, parking fees in cities, and the electrification of public transport. For many years, she has collaborated with economic practice entities and non-profit organizations operating in transport, promoting research results and the idea of sustainable transport. In the middle, we have Professor Petr Rosenal, who is the Deputy Head of Department of Systems Engineering and Informatics at the Technical University of Ostrava. In his didactics, teaching, also research, he focuses on e-business applications, integration platforms, informatics, e-business application, IT management, artificial intelligence and expert systems, informatics, business information system. He's also interested in virtual reality. Welcome, Katowice. Professor Franciszek Zapletal is working at the System Engineering and Informatics Department at the Technical University of Ostrava. Currently, he works as an associate professor also at Škoda Auto University in Czech Republic, apart from Ostrava. His main research areas include multi-criteria decision-making methods and optimization methods, especially under risk and uncertainty. He took part in 2 long-term research internships in Kyoto, in Japan, for 8 months, and University of Granada in Spain for 6 months. He delivered many invited speeches on stochastic and fuzzy decision-making, and currently he works also as an editor of Applied Soft Computing Journal. Welcome. And last but not the least, to my left, we have Professor Karel Chlawacek, who is teaching courses focused on international finance, macroeconomics, and behavioral economics at the Faculty of Economics of Technical University of Ostrava. As a vice dean, he is also responsible for the international relations at the faculty, and there are many international projects he was involved in, dealing with science popularization, developing digital education, and the project focused on financial literacy, entrepreneurship education, as well as circular economics and climate change. He has also a long-time professional career in the private sector, actually for more than 30 years now. He has established and managed primary and secondary school, as well as language school and lifelong learning center. He was a project manager of various educational projects funded by European Union or regional authorities, mostly as a lead partner. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, before I let our panelists speak about the topic, economics for ecology, social impact, let me introduce ourselves a little bit to this very, very broad topic. First of all, we are supposed to talk about, well, economy, society, and environment. But rarely we realize how these systems, these are in fact systems, are interrelated. Economy is embedded in society, and both economy and society are embedded in the environment. This is obvious, this is true, but very often we forget about it, and we often think, well, what is more important, economy or environment? The environment is the fundamental issue, and we need to keep this in mind when discussing issues associated with particular problems. Of course, we will concentrate on more specific issues later on. So we have this embeddedness, but different dynamics. And very often, this is the answer to many issues that we face, that changes in the environment, of course, occur over longer periods of time. While in economics, I could stop for 5 seconds, and in these 5 seconds, you could make huge profits, losses, who knows. For the environment, this is almost nothing. For our economic decisions, it may be a lot. So this different dynamics, of course, impinges on our horizon of analysis of relationships between economics, society, and environment. Because very often we see the difference, and we see it also with our behavior between short-term and long-term planning, also economic planning. Very often we pursue short-term goals, forgetting about long-term goals. So this is the very general observation that we are all interrelated. But then when it comes down to closer inspection, and when we look at households, companies, governments, financial institutions, foreign sector, which are also related to each other via circular flows in the economy, then we can ask more specific questions. For instance, when we look at companies, very often we discuss the issue of corporate social responsibility. Currently, we talk a lot about ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues, sustainability, and we ask how we can incentivize corporations to adopt sustainable practices. What role does this corporate or environmental social responsibility play in this process? When we look at households, we very often discuss the issue of consumer behavior with relation to sustainability. How we can influence consumer behavior to promote sustainable practices. What is the role of education? Actually, this will be one of the questions that I will ask in a moment. When we look at governments, very often we talk about economic policies that are supposed to promote environmental sustainability. And we ask how we can design policies that promote environmental sustainability, but very often we add without compromising economic growth. We want to have both. We want to have sustainability and we want to have growth. But is it possible? Here we are at the University of Economics. Economics teaches us that there is no free lunch. You cannot have both very often. Or there are some trade-offs. You can resign, sometimes you can just resign of a part, you can just reduce growth, not necessarily involve in degrowth. But very often we forget about alternative costs, costs of alternatives that were not selected. And then if the growth, economic growth is central to many discussions, if we see that growth can be actually detrimental for the environment and maybe sometimes even for the society, because the high pace of living is very stressful and unhealthy in the end of the day, then we can ask why we observe, why there is such a pressure on economic growth. Maybe one of the answers is in the construction of the global currency order, which is built on credit. Monetary systems depend on credit. So if you want to grow, usually you take a loan, you pay for your business, then you need to pay more. How you can pay more? Only if you grow. So these are, of course, many lines of potential discussions. We will not touch them all because we will focus, as I said, on more specific issues. I just wanted to sketch a background. Nevertheless, apart from the behavior of companies, households, governments, financial institutions, we also have a look at the role of technology. And very often we ask how can technological innovations contribute to sustainable development, to support the environment. But very often behind our head we have this question, how we can have both growth and no climate change, no losses on the side of the environment. So, as I said, I tried to sketch some areas which are somewhere behind within this broad topic of economics for ecology. Of course, we want to concentrate more on social impact, which is also quite a broad topic. Nevertheless, we are currently in Katowice. Katowice is the European City of Science. And we say that in Katowice, science is the new industry. We will see whether these plans will be fulfilled. But this special year, the title of the European City of Science actually inspires us to focus a little bit more on something more specific, like a city. And when we talk about cities, which are supposed to be sustainable, very often we look at the term smart city. So, starting the first round of questions, I would like to ask Franciszek Zapletal to explain us, of course, in the context of our broader topic, what actually the smart city is, why we should, why we should go towards such a smartness of cities. Of course, we have different perspectives. We have perspectives of households, we have perspectives of local authorities, economists, of course, technologies. And what is the link? How can smart cities potentially exert some impact on the society and our resilience? Okay, the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to everybody. Maybe if I can, before I answer the question, I will just react on one your idea. You asked the question, maybe it was a self-targeted question, I don't know, is how we can at the same time maximize our, let's say, GDP or some economic performance and at the same time protect environment or behave sustainably. And I think that the answer is quite easy. It's impossible. Because, and at the beginning I felt a little bit not so strong at the field of economics in comparison with my colleagues because I'm rather mathematician. But since you introduced me that I'm an expert in multi-criteria decision making, and this is the point. If you have more criteria, and if the criteria are antagonistic, and those two are antagonistic, purely, clearly, you must find some compromise. And it's all about setting the weight, setting of importance of both criteria. So it's about us. If we think that more important is sustainability, we will behave in a different way if you compare it than if we just follow the profits, follow the wealth, follow the whatever else measurable in currency. This is very important to have it in mind.
Yes, so very often we can observe that in many countries still economic growth is the primary goal, and what they try to do is that assuming a given rate of economic growth, what we can do for the environment. So this is the typical practice, not necessarily consciously reducing the rate of growth to support the environment. Okay.
Yeah, and this is also very strongly related with the issue of time. If we consider 5 seconds, it's nothing for environment, and that's why our politicians, I mean not only Czech politicians or Polish politicians, of course, I think it's all the same around the world, they purely put more weight on economic growth, because the impact is immediate or almost immediate, definitely faster than environmental reaction. And you know, the length of period with power is 4 or 5 years. So that's why it's so easy to focus more on just one side of this issue. Yeah. And let's get back to smart cities. So first, what is a smart city? I think that it is a similar tough topic than if you want to define who is a smart person. And I think that there is no precise definition, but what is, and this is just my opinion, if you tell to somebody that we want to establish, we want to reach the smart city, most people, or at least many people, think that it is a synonym for lazy city, that we just want to improve comfort. Because if a city is smart, then it improves comfort for people. Yeah, partly yes. On the other hand, a smart city must be also sustainable. It should be also resilient, because if it collapses under very small pressure, it will not work, of course. A smart city is a city with well-educated citizens. And of course, it will be very naive to call smart city the concept where some harmful actions are taken towards environment. So all these, I know that it is not a definition, it's rather a set of parameters, but it's really uneasy to set the term. And then another issue is most often when, and I am a researcher, so if I make some literature review and put the term smart city into Google Scholar or anywhere else, usually the results, the papers in some scientific journals give you back some studies, some models where some high-tech technologies are used. So usually you use these IoT things which are smart on the one hand, but on the other hand also very often expensive and unaffordable for current real cities. But it is not true that everything must be done only with high-tech technologies. I can give you an example. Together with my colleagues from Czech Republic, Serbia, and Switzerland, we are exploring some possibilities how to improve the waste collection. Not in cities, rather in villages, because of some reasons I can provide them to you. In the Czech Republic, and I think that it's very similar to all countries, at least in Serbia and Switzerland is the same, so I suppose that it works the same also in Poland. In villages, you are supposed to have a fixed schedule of waste collection. So you know you have your house with your bin, and you know that every 2 weeks the car will come, will serve your bin and go away. So you know that you have 14 days to make your bin full, and after that, after 2 weeks, it will be empty again, regardless what's happening during these 2 weeks. But so you can imagine that you prepay for this service, which is quite usual. On the other hand, the motivation to reduce the waste is zero. Okay, if your bin is full or overfull after 2 weeks, probably you will need an additional bin. But otherwise, it doesn't matter if the truck will take a half full bin or full bin, because you pay still the same. But we are trying to establish or to let's say establish a new system where you order that your bin is requiring collection. So you know that your bin is full, and you will, I don't know, send a message using phone or push the button somewhere or whatever else. But you can also go to the municipality office and say my bin is, or you use some browser, internet. That doesn't. So you can use technologies which are available, and under just very simple switching of logic of doing. If you know that you must pay, and you can divide the whole year because usually the fee is paid at least in the Czech Republic every year. So if you divide your fee, which is paid now, by 14 days, so you will get the fee per one serving of your bin. And even if you pay the same amount of money for one serving, if you know that for next serving you will have to pay still the same but additional value, you are motivated to not to make the bin full at the same time, and you will think more about, for example, separating the waste among plastic and so on. And so no special technologies are needed. Of course, if you have some gadget, for example, gathering data about the weight of bin or load of trash inside, it's easier, of course. But on the other hand, it takes some money for buying it, for installing it, for maintaining it, and so on. So despite we can use the technologies which are available just now without any special investment, it is possible to become smarter. Maybe I was a little bit longer, sorry.
Thank you very much. But you mentioned an important thing before, that our society, our citizens are supposed to be well educated. Because what the risk is, because economics is also about incentives. So on one hand, we can have this incentive that we can reduce, but we can try to reduce even more, throwing our waste somewhere in the forest, whatever. So this is also about education and moral standards. So this is to some extent difficult, how to design an optimal system that would reduce the risk of, let's say, illegal waste management and increase efficiency of such a system offered with technologies that you mentioned. Thank you very much. Right now we will remain, let's say, in the area of problems vital for cities, smart or not smart, namely the issue of transport and transportation. And I would like to ask Anna Urbanek about, because actually Anna is involved in many international projects that link ecology, sustainability and economics of transportation. So please share some insights from this interdisciplinary research. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. But before I answer, maybe I will refer, because it is very interesting. I was thinking intensively about it, about this statement that 5 seconds doesn't mean a lot for environment, but maybe to just plant a seed in your head, just to think about it maybe later. Really, maybe every second a big number of trees are dying in the world, yes, or species or animals, etc., etc. If we switch off our phones for 5 seconds, so it can mean a lot. For example, energetic system, and then for the environment. So sometimes this time span it depends how we look at it, and the same is also with cities. Because on one hand we can look at the smart cities, and we can talk about the new information and communication technology that help us to manage the traffic, to manage waste, etc., etc. But what we need to do right now, in my opinion, is not to focus so much on the technology, because I always give this example to my students. So once my professor told me a story when he was in the kindergarten. It was in the 1960s. He was asked by teachers to draw vehicles that will be used in 2020 or in the 21st century. And of course, children draw planes, flying carpets, helicopters, etc., etc., because it was 1960 or 1950, I don't know, but these days. And they imagined that in the 21st century, everything will change. So, but my question is it impossible right now to fly your own plane or your own helicopter to work? Is it something impossible? No, it is possible from the technological point of view. But why we don't do this? Because of money, economics, yes? So it's and organization problems, because we need to organize the movement, etc. And nowadays we have, because the topic of our today's debate is economics for ecology and economics without borders, what we want to do, in our research projects, we want to solve these organizational problems with people's movement in the cities. Because it's not enough to implement new technology like electrification or just smart technology for traffic management. But what we need to do, we need to change the way we think, the way we move, the way we plan cities. And what we need to do is to change the way we behave. For example, our research is focused right now on the problem that cities, all cities have worldwide. It is connected with unsustainable traffic, which is mostly based on the private vehicles and private cars. So, of course, transport is the lifeblood of the economy, but of course it is also a source of external cost, a source of accidents, a big source of pollution. And when we look at the cities right now, we can see that for example, if we compare it to the architectural plan, so if we take a look at cities, how they are designed, so we can see that in the center of this architectural project is a big garage with a car, and all the rooms are like small satellites, you know? So this is the way we design cities right now. So do you want to have your home designed like this? Not necessarily. Yes, we want to live in a different environment. But cities worldwide are facing problems connected with private vehicles, with unsustainable traffic, deteriorating quality of life. That's why we have problems with suburbanization. People are moving outskirts because they want to live in green areas. And in our project called Sumodo, which is international project, so it's also connected with no borders. It is an international project. There are 3 universities from 3 countries involved, from Hungary, Spain, and Poland, 2 universities from Poland, Silesian University of Technology and University of Economics. And 3 cities, 2 cities in Hungary and 1 in Poland, it's Katowice. And what we want to do in this project, we want to change the way we think about our cities. So we want to design some kind of platform, simulation platform, that will help city planners, government, but also citizens to plan, to change the way they plan their travel and to change the way we design cities. Everything is focused around the concept of 50-minute cities. It's a concept which is based on the assumption that we should design cities in that way for each inhabitant to have access around 50 minutes or X minutes, because it's not so strict, but around 50 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, it depends on the purpose of travel, to have the access to the main points of interest, so main urban facilities. So to change the way we travel, so there is what we want to achieve is to plan our daily travel routine in this way to reduce the use of private cars and to increase the use of active transport modes like walking, bicycles, etc. So of course it is not easy because it requires a lot of knowledge about the preferences, about travel behaviors of citizens, but also it requires some kind of models for the city policy assessment. And this is also our task, the task of the University of Economics, that we want to build a model to evaluate transport policy in cities that is focused on the strategy of 50-minute city. Because nowadays we don't have such complex models, such complex indicator to assess it, and for example to compare it in time or to compare it worldwide amongst different cities. So we are working on that, and of course the main aim of this project is to change the way we think about city and change the way we use different transport modes.
Thank you very much. I will just add one thing about this metaphor of 5 seconds, that the examples that you mentioned, cutting trees, saving energy, actually refer to human activities. So more economy than environment as such on its own. And nevertheless, thank you very much, because talking about traffic in Katowice these days, with all these major reconstructions, is of course very important for well-being of citizens, the well-being of students. I'm curious whether you take into account the process of aging of citizens of cities, because this also changes both behaviors but also traveling patterns. Nevertheless, as I know that Grzegorz Sierpiński is also involved in some of the projects that you are involved in, I would like to ask Grzegorz whether you have anything to add to compared to what Ania said.
Yes, thank you very much. Especially thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Yes, as you said at the beginning, the topic of the session is very broad, and because in order to maximize social impact, in my opinion, the economic dimension is only one of some dimensions. So it is, of course, a strong factor, but and I'm sure that during today's debate many things about it will be said. But if we will take a look for the city by using the transport system, and the origin and destinations lists and the needs of the citizens, we also should take into account some activities related to the infrastructure, some organization problems, economy, of course, and the transport of the information. You said about the education, and I think not only about education at schools, at universities, but also the education by using just the transfer of the information, by using some information for the travelers when they travel day by day. So the integration of the different kind of the dimensions is very important, and that is why we are using it by realizing some international projects, also together with the University of Economics, as Ania said. And at our department, we have experience with some international projects since over 10 years. We realized 5 international projects under the ERANET funds with the Spanish partners, Turkish partners, German partners, and Netherlands partners, and others. And they were addressed to different parts, let's say, of the transport system. So 2 of them, which acronyms was Cactus and Platon, were dedicated just to public transport, and the public transport companies which implements the public transport services in the cities. And during them, we thought how to change the fleet of the buses into the electric ones. So, of course, the economic factor is very important there, but we also needed to include some other models, like the energy consumption models, like changes with the limited range of them, and some other technical aspects. Other projects, which acronym was SMILE, it was addressed to the transport of goods, and in that case, SMILE means especially the first and last mile of the transport. So in that case, we can say that many of the ecological approach and ecological means of transport we can use, especially at that stages of the transport. And the last 2 projects, green traveling and electric traveling, which we realized were addressed to the just traveling persons in the cities and the urban areas. And we can say that one of the most important thing is economy aspect, because we can use some tools and solutions to shape the travel behavior, but also the transfer of the information, like in travel planners, for example. Many of persons which travel uses some special habits, and it is very difficult to change the habits. And sometimes when the transport system will change, persons couldn't see it because of the strong habit. So the good transfer of the information about new possibilities, like the bike sharing system, like the new public transport lines or something like this, which we should include very strongly to the traveling planners, is also something important in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that, again, many of us would like to have a nice apartment in the city with a tree behind the window and a car just below. So again, we want to have too much at the same time. And you also mentioned the issue of habits. Yes, that, well, information, even if it's available, may be not enough. And very often we also talk about, well, some behavioral manipulations like nudging to change the behavior. Of course, it's not that we restrict the freedom of choice. We respect the freedom of choice. However, we try to, let's say, maybe not manipulate, but motivate people to change their behavior, to make everything more sustainable. Another issue is that we look at others. Okay, let others use the bus, I will use the car. Yeah, this is what we can see very often. And if more people use the bus, the better I will be, because I will not see any traffic. Currently, when we see students leaving earlier at the university, we say that they want to avoid traffic. Okay, but we don't want to avoid asking the next panelist. I would like to ask Peter Rosehal about technologies, because I know that you are a specialist also in digital technologies. So, of course, there is sort of a sign of hope, because due to digital technologies, it is much easier also for students to engage in car sharing and so on and so on. So how do you perceive new technologies? And maybe you have also other remarks on the topic of our debate.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, we are talking about economy without border. So I am thinking about ecology without border and about information technologies without border. So my opinion is we have still border, but they are more virtual to compare a situation maybe 100 years ago. It means we have internet, which is a perfect example of transport without border, maybe only data transport, but internet don't understand the border from the technical point of view. And because, as you mentioned, I'm from the Department of System Engineering, so we understand the most important as a system and the element of system. And now we have a one planet, what is maybe the same like a system, and we can discuss about the element and elements, because we have a lot of elements here. And I'm a little angry to my colleagues, because I plan to say what is the most important element, and I think the people. And we already mentioned here, and it was mentioned, Franciszek say about the motivation. Now colleagues say about maybe change of thinking. So who of us want to change our lives? Because it's just that's problem. we can say, okay, we have a new information technology, so we are more effective. But at the same time, think about one thing. We have information technologies in a business. Maybe we are more effective, so we have a better economic performance. But this is not goal. We want to be sustainable. We have information technologies in personal life. Finally, we are talking about the social networks. We can mention YouTube or Facebook or TikTok or something like this. If we will use these services less, we will have a less consumption, and it's about the consumption of our resources. So, and this is decision making. So still we are talking about the people, and it's necessary to change the people. But please let me add, we are thinking in a global scope or in a local scope. So now we are in Europe, and we know that we have maybe strong activities in the Green Deal. But what about the rest of the planet? We mentioned the education. Of course, in Europe, we have probably higher education to compare to Africa or South America. But if we change in Europe and we will be successful in Europe, it doesn't mean in a global scope we will be the same successfulity. So sustainability is a very complex problem, and it's difficult to say where to start. I think technology can help, but at the same time, technology brings more pollution, and we must very sensitively balance our lives, our activities, and how to use it. It means this is only a tool. Information technology is a tool which can be used, that it will help us, but at the same time, it can be quite different as a result. So I think the most important, and a lot of people here, it was mentioned, the people and our ability to change the behavior, how we behave.
Thank you very much. Indeed, with new technologies, digital technologies, we can achieve more. We can have more efficient companies with higher profits at the cost, because these technologies are costly in terms of energy, at the cost of our resources. And as you said, we would like to have more sustainable companies, but again, this is like the prisoner's dilemma situation, like with public transport. I don't want to be the first to use the public transportation because I don't want to sit in the same traffic jam but in a different place. This is the same thing applies to companies. I cannot be sustainable because if my profits are not big enough, I will lose my market shares, my position. And one of the solutions to situations like prisoner dilemma is external intervention, maybe public intervention, public policies. And to some extent, we can say that some European regulations, more or less related to European Green Deal, are supposed to help such situations that cannot be solved on their own, because this is, let's say, a different level of complexity. Yet they are often criticized. Of course, in some cases, this is the issue of timing, the issue of tools. There are many controversies around, but sometimes we get stuck in problems we cannot solve on our own, and we need something else. Yes, maybe some negotiations, but in order to achieve this, we need well-educated citizens, open-minded, and let's turn for a second to education. I would like to ask our last panelist, Karel Hlavaček, about his experience, but also his opinions concerning public and private education. What is your perspective on the topic of our debate, economics for ecology, social impact?
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, organizers, for inviting us. Hello, Katowice. We are always pleased to be here because it's really good fun, mostly with your people.
Even though we talk about difficult issues.
Yeah, of course, but it's always better if it's fun, because education is mostly not fun. Don't you agree, all of you? Okay, stand up, anyone who is enjoying the education this week. Thank you.
But look, this is nudging. Maybe you should ask people to stand who is not enjoying.
Yeah, that was my purpose, of course. Maybe I will ask some question later involving some physical activity. But I just want to attract your attention. Sorry for this interruption of your communication channels and or meditation or relaxation in this after lunch time. So let's back to the question. Education and impact to ecology. I have the experience that when I was in the primary school or secondary school or at the university, the education was a science or a hard work or something to be done in a sophisticated way. Because suddenly our civilization gathered a lot of knowledge, and because of printing press, because of books, because of radio, because of TV, and later computers, internet, and all other digital stuff, we kept all the information. So it became science, and it became a sophisticated activity. But correct me, maybe it's just my personal opinion, maybe it's completely wrong, but because when something is too complicated, that only experts know what it is all about, then the general public or ordinary man like me, hopefully, we don't understand. We don't understand the complicated topics, right? So when we were taught in our schools about ecology, there were so many weird words. Something like recycling or reduction of emissions or emissions. I couldn't remember what's the difference between emission and emission, right? Then they were showing us that there is some NOx or SO something, some number, or CO2. Wow, so I was learning the alphabet again. But, you know, there was no reaction to that. Okay, I memorized that, I passed the test, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, and we did it. I'm quite sure that even my teacher was not understanding the topic at all, right? But nowadays, you definitely are aware of climate change. Are you? Okay. Stand up. Who has heard already about climate change, please? If you don't, you are idiots. So please stand up. Thank you very much. And it's really good for your body. No. Keep standing. I didn't say sit down. So please keep standing, right? Okay. Sit down only if you agree that like the movement Fridays for Future or other civic movements are total nonsense. Okay, thank you. Maybe you don't like Greta. Personally, I think she's not a sane person. But okay, it means something. Now, you can sit down if you understand the word carbon. Thank you for your exercise. So, we know the word carbon. We know the word coal, especially in this region. When I was a kid, suddenly in 1980s, 90s, there were examples, even the teachers who didn't understand, they were showing us example that look at our mountains, look at the forests. They are not green anymore, they are turning to brown. And that's because of the emissions, NO2, CO2, SO something, right? We didn't understand. We understood the color, the problem, that there is some problem. But back to education. When we started to use simple words like carbon or decarbonization, well, it's not so simple, but okay, we understand, maybe after this conference. Or when someone explained us that there is something like recycling, or when we were introduced to public transport, there was something what I could understand. And now, especially every time I'm in Katowice, I understand what traffic jam is. It's a simple example. So, when in our education we are using the language that everyone understands, we can succeed. Because I'm teaching economics mostly. But even my students just before the master exams, when I ask them, can you explain inflation? Oof, what a tricky question for a person who is studying economics for 5 years, right? Because it's just not that easy, because they are not working with the word every day. But when I say, do you understand when prices are going up? Or where something is more expensive? Of course I do. And that's it. That's about language that we use. So when our education is using real-world examples, the language, what everyone understands, then we can succeed, right? So not make it too complicated. Okay, I'm talking for too long. But when I was yesterday night preparing for this conference, of course, too late, I just made some kind of a mental exercise. Okay, if we are talking about the climate change and decarbonization, okay, it means something, maybe we do some protest, and of course everyone would go to the main square to do the protest against the air pollution, especially here in this area, in Katowice or Ostrava, it's the same. But then, as Julia was proposing, I'll probably not be the first one in the bus, or not the first one giving up my car, because we like cars. They are really handy and sometimes they are really beautiful. But I was thinking the climate change, how the climate change is impacting our educational systems, the schools. Okay, I found some scientific studies, papers, telling that there is a great impact. But where? Here in Poland, in Czechia? Not really. It's mainly in the southern countries because of the higher temperatures, floods, heat waves, or tornadoes. Basically, the kids, many kids, are losing the chance to be educated. And that's really a great loss. Okay, but it's not here. So I was thinking about something local. Then we have the bad experience recently from the flood that hit this part of the country. So probably you know about the experience of Klocko, or the area in my region, that some schools were flooded. Okay, this is kind of an external shock, hopefully just short term. We can overcome that. But the idea, what is the long-term effect of the education? Because we're discussing it that, okay, in 5 seconds or in short term, I can withstand something, I can give up something, and then I always look to the bright side of the world and think how the things are going to be better in the future. But our classrooms are changing. Now, you tell me, you don't have to get up anymore, I promise. But just raise your hand if you feel the heat during your exam day in June. Raise your hand. I can feel it because I am usually just overwatching my students. And during the exam period, it's really extreme example because the classroom is full of students, right? And they are sweating. It's not a nice experience, I can tell you. So we are opening windows. But it's not enough because outside it's over 30 degrees in June. And still, June is the month of final exams of all the period that's important for your lives. And it's the worst month from all the 10 months of schooling, right, for exams. So what do we do? Same as in transport. I don't know, 20 years ago, there was no air conditioning in the public transport. Nowadays, everyone demands it, right? So we want air conditioning in our school, okay? Or we want better insulation, okay? So that's the negative side, because someone has to pay for that. And is this ecological? Who knows? Okay, another example, positive one, because so far I was a bit too negative. The schools are saving quite a lot because of climate change. They don't have to pay for the heating so much. I am saving my money because I'm not paying for the so much heating. Every year it's better and better. Okay, I know the energy prices are going up. Bad luck. But we know who is the reason. Then there is a positive effect as well. There are not so many broken legs and arms because there is no ice on the pavement, right? Okay, you don't like that joke. Okay, another positive effect of climate change. And this one is for real, at least for me. We are facing some uncertainty. That's František's topic. Uncertainty or some risky situation, right? Something is changing and we need to adjust. For many decades, especially 90s or after 2000, even the 80s, it was pretty stable. The economic environment was stable. Even the ecology situation was not that bad, right? And we became lazy, basically. We could switch on the television, we could turn on the heating system, we could start the engine of every car, and everything is working. Even now you are reading the news on your phones, and everything is working. It's fine, it's instant, right? Just the study is difficult, it's not instant. But it's positive for us, for human beings, to be in the situation when you are facing risk, when you are facing the uncertainty, because suddenly it's dangerous. It's like to be in a jungle or African savanna, or just to be in the icy cold water. You need to fight for your survival. And if you learn this, then even the Katowice region can survive. So if the teachers can stress you a little bit, not in June because it's too hot, but stress you in November, that will pay off. Sorry for being too long.
Thank you. You mentioned several threats. I will not address them all, but one thing, of course, not using sophisticated language when communicating important messages or educating people, of course, can be important. Nevertheless, it might mean not enough, because knowledge is not enough to change people's behavior very often, because of behavioral inertia, status quo biases, and so on and so on. So many informational interventions turn out to be ineffective in changing people's behavior. So this is something that we are still discussing, how to change intrinsic motivation of people, not only their mindset, but also the way they behave. But you mentioned also a very important issue that I skipped in my introduction, namely the global context. Because currently, and it refers not only to education, but we can see that due to climate change, who loses most? People that used to pollute the least. The global south is suffering most, and it's not only, we can see it not only in terms of education, that their possibilities for their education are decreasing, but in many dimensions of their lives. And as you may already know, climate migration exceeds migration due to some military conflicts all over the world. So this is, for sure, this is a challenge for us for the future. We can actually ask people, we could have an interesting and thought-provoking survey. Would you engage rather in activities aiming at mitigating climate change, or you would engage in activities associated with accepting climate migrants from the global south? Because there are many people that simultaneously deny climate change and simultaneously don't want to accept any migrants. So this is also like not having both at the same time, while there is also sort of a trade-off. So again, we touch many issues, but after this the longest round of questions, we could see maybe more specific but very relevant issues from the micro perspective, the perspective of the city, towards even the global perspective. And as we want to leave some time for questions from the audience, let's try to somehow wrap up what we have discussed here, maybe add a little bit, and let's try to think about most important, according to you, channels, maybe most promising channels through which economists as people or economics as a science can have the biggest impact on the society. And maybe in this round we will simply go one by one, then we will start with Grzegorz.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Yes, because the previous speaker made some exercises with the audience, I'm jealous, and I would like to ask you for one small exercise before I will ask the question. So please try to put your hands like this. Okay, and now please take a look which hand is on the top. Please remember it. Okay. And do this one more time. Please try again to see which hand is on the top.
The same.
Usually it is the same. And now let's try to put your hands on the other way. Can you do this? It is possible, but it is difficult, yes? Okay, so this short exercise shows us the habits and how the change of the habits is difficult. So when we are talking about the economic channels which we can use, of course, we need to find the channel which really make the impact for the travel behavior in my research field. So we can do some incentives or some restrictions, and we are using them in different cities, so we can implement some restrictions which we do not like for example, fees when we want to enter to the city center by using the car. And we know some examples from London, from Milan, from Stockholm, and other ones. It can reduce the volume of traffic, but also it should be activity parallel to the implementation of the real alternative for it. So it is not only the economic, but also some technical problem. If we will implement some good connection with the public transport, maybe fast city trams, maybe metro, in many cities it is great example. We can change the travel behavior. Of course, we can also think about other restrictions, like also additional fees by car parking. And it is, for example, in Katowice city. So it should increase the rotation rate, but it also should reduce the time wasting for finding the free place to park. So it should reduce also the negative impact of the traffic for the environment. But also, when we are talking about some channels, we can say about the incentives. And some of them, I listed some, so let me take a look. Some of them could be, for example, subsidies for some means of transport, like for the electric bikes, but also for the electric cars. When the subsidies end in some countries, we can see now that the number of new registered cars in that country decreased. So it is strongly information for us that the economic impact we can see in this example. And maybe something more, free public transport or something like this. It looks good, but sometimes it is very difficult to predict what happened with the people. These examples, let me see the paper on the capital of the Estonia in Tallinn. It is well-known example. When they introduced it in the 2013, 3% of the car journeys moved to the public transport, but also 5% of the people who previously traveled by foot decided to use the public transport. So sometimes it is very difficult to predict what happened when we will introduce something, but we should do this and we should try and find the best option. Thank you.
Yeah, this is very interesting that zero price or a low price can make a huge difference. Yes, because sometimes when you have something for free, you behave totally different compared to the situation when the fees are very, very low. Anya.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this question once again. Maybe I will add only that according to the studies conducted so far, it is impossible to change people's behavior only due to incentives and only due to positive impact. Without restrictions, it is impossible to change anything, and without this strict political intervention based on restriction, it is impossible to change behaviors according to, for example, car usage. Because still our attitude is we are addicted to cars and addicted at different levels. Not only, it's not a level of that we need a mobility, we need a car as a mean of transport, but we need a car as a way to show off. We need a car as a symbol of our freedom, of our choice, because it's pretty, yes, etc., etc. And sometimes students are fighting with me, and they are saying, no, our generation is different. We don't believe that car can represent our status, social status, or something like this. We are different. So I'm asking them, okay, so imagine two neighbors. One is the same people, the same age, the same handsome neighbor, you know, and one is going, you know, well dressed with a suit bag, and he's riding a car every morning to get to his job, and the second one is using public transport. Yes, who you want to marry with? Yes, so it's simple.
The other one can be the president of Switzerland, for instance.
But still we have some stereotypes connected with car usage and public transport, that, you know, someone who is using public transport is a loser. He doesn't have a car, yeah? So still we have some stereotypes. So without intervention, it is impossible. So this is only, I wanted to add to be aware of it. But thank you for this question, because I was thinking, because Grzegorz gave a transport background, so maybe I will go a little bit broader, because when I'm thinking about channel, first that come to my mind is channel, so I think maybe social media or something like this, like a channel to communicate the results of research, to educate people, etc., etc. But connected with this, when I see what is happening right now, when I see what will happen according to AI, so of course social media is not it's not a bad thing or a good thing, because it's only a tool. You can use it in a good way or in a bad way. But now it's a main source of manipulation in many cases, and disinformation. So for me, to have the biggest impact as economists and scientists in general, and our main task right now is to educate people. Education to fight with fake news, to fight with manipulation, and to fight with everything which lead us to make wrong choices. Because even climate change, for some people it's a matter of belief, yes? I don't believe in climate change. Oh, come on. It's not a matter of faith. It's a fact, yes? But still, what we need to do, because social media nowadays have such big impact on people, and especially young people, that in my opinion, the biggest channel to have an impact is still social media and electronic and all internet and all these things. But in this way that we need to change people's thinking, and we need to educate people. We need to start from the youngest people. And of course, at the universities, we need to teach people how to think critically, how to check information, how to use information, and how not to let others manipulate them. Because unfortunately nowadays a lot of things is based on manipulation. And of course, we need to also use these channels, these internet channels, etc., this tool of communication to build a trust, once again, in science. Because nowadays what we can observe is that there are still people who don't believe in science, although for their daily life is based on science, hundreds of years of human development and science. Yes, even the water that we have today, or microphones, cars, washing machines, everything is based on science. But also nowadays but we have built our civilization also on trust, because each day we trust that I drink water, not a poison, yes? That my money will be there in a bank tomorrow too. Yes, so we have a civilization of trust, and we have a civilization of science, but still we don't trust science. So pandemic showed us that there are people that are questioning science, that are questioning something that should, of course, it's good to ask, it's good to question, but it need to be, of course, wise. And this is our task now. And when we talk about economics for ecology, and when we talk about the science for ecology, we need to work on this trust, and we need to work to build this trust, and we need to work to teach to teach people how to think, how to use the information. Because even in our field, in transport sector, people, for people, you know, increasing a fee, parking fee in the city or changing transport policy, like for example, you know, closing a city for car movement or something, we need to teach them that it is done for our for future, for our common purpose. That it's not a matter of, you know, that someone wants to make something bad for us and to want to make our day bad. Yes, it is that we need to make some actions to have better future, and we need to also trust that some actions, also some political interventions, so economic interventions, are for better future, and that's why we need to educate people, and education.
Thank you very much. Many things again. Of course, education is important. You mentioned the issue of restrictions, and actually we should also make people ready to accept restrictions, because we are spoiled by the 1990s, early the beginning of this century, the willingness to accept it, not to resist. And remember, we are not our car. The car does not define us. We are something ontologically totally different. So this is something we need to really work on. I will not comment further because you know, the time in our discussion is like in economics. Petr, please, any comment on channels?
Okay, to add to Anya, you know the jokes, we have a smartphone, but in hands of stupid users. You mentioned artificial intelligence. It doesn't mean that we will no need the education, but on the other hand, it's necessary to be more educated, to be able to still be one step ahead these technologies. So it's very important. But I have another example. I'm not sure if we are optimistic or pessimistic here in discussion, but imagine the weekend, and imagine how easy it is to buy a flight and spend the weekend in Barcelona, in Paris, I don't know where. This is thanks to combination of technologies. So we have, it's easy to buy flights, and we have e-banking and so on. It's thanks to possibilities in transport. And the question is, what do you prefer? To spend a weekend and to have a flight and to enjoy it in Barcelona, for example, or you stay at home? Because this is a different about, and this is a question of consumption of resources. And if you say, yes, okay, I have no problem to stay at home, I have a question, and are you able to do it till the end of their life? Because still it's important to think in a short time and a long time. And again, I want to say it's about the education, to understand these perspectives, because if we will not successful in development and consumption reduction and so on, the future, I don't know what will be in future. And specifically young people, for young generation, this is very important. For older people, okay, but they have maybe 10 years of life, but if you are 20 years old, you have the life ahead. So long time and short time perspective, and as they say, the education, and still it's strongly influenced by the country's politics and so on. So the education is and the real data, real information about the possible future.
Thank you. I think that somewhere between the lines we have the issue of scarcity. Very often economics says that the biggest issue, the biggest problem is that we have unlimited needs, I would say unlimited wants, and scarce resources to satisfy them. And scarcity is very often somehow imprinted in economic education. And this is also the issue that actually currently, especially if we look at the northern hemisphere, we live in the world of abundance, coupled with digital abundance of so many goods. Each of us can watch the same movie at the same time, no problem. Rather, time is scarce, also from the perspective of the environment and the perspective of our discussion. František.
Thank you. I hate repeating the ideas again and again, but and I would be very happy if I can come with some super extra efficient channel, but I completely agree with my pre-speakers that the best way, the most efficient way is really education. By the way, this is also the proved conclusion how to avoid so-called Dunning-Kruger effect when people are either overestimating their knowledge and skills and everything. And the more stupid people are, the more overestimated they are.
The famous Mount Stupid, Valley of Despair, and Slope of Enlightenment. I teach my students this at the beginning of every academic year so that they know why experts are not so loud, but empty barrels make the most sound. Education.
Exactly. Yeah. I think you completely hit the point that our standards are increasing all the time, and I think that the development which we now undergone is like a time bomb, because really we used to increase our standards, and so we want to consume everything, and we are not prepared to pay for it. And it's very difficult, and this time, if I talk with my mom or grandma, they always tell me, you are so picky, and especially my children, you are so picky in your food, and you do like this, and you hate this, and we didn't do that in the past. Okay, it was so easy not to do that because you couldn't afford it. If you went to the shop, there was almost nothing, and of course also your salary was lower. So it is so easy if you are restricted in your possibilities. It's so easy to make wiser decisions. And what is important, I think that people very often know what is good and what is wrong. I think that all, and I would never use this word in such occasion, but Karel has already used it, idiots who mine the bitcoins and all other virtual cryptocurrencies and run computers just to get some virtual value, know that it is wrong. That it is harmful for environment, and it doesn't make any % just to get some money. But the question is how to force them to behave differently. Yeah.
This is an open question.
And I know very well that Karel wants to add something, so...
Yes. Last word for Karel.
Thank you. Just a small exercise, right? No speech. Just the, let's say, mental counting, calculating. Okay, let's assume that, and I checked that, that watching video online, streaming, is about 0.3 kilograms of CO2, carbon dioxide. I know that. I learned that in my school, but don't tell my teachers. Do you know the song, Hey Teacher, Leave the Kids Alone? So, we will leave you alone in a few minutes, don't worry. But my calculation is like this. Our society became a society of individualists. We are spending more time with our gadgets and our channels. But think about that. If once per week we watch the video with my friends, with our friends, together, and it's 4 of us, so we can save at least 1 kilogram of CO2, right? And later we can discuss, so we can create the society. So let's just make the calculation. So if we make it like 50 weeks per year, so we can save 50 kilograms of CO2. And of course, we can save the electricity. And I know that you are students of Faculty of Economics, so you can calculate very well. So calculate how much you can save in your bills for data, for electricity, but also for the CO2. And if, because the Katowice region is really large and populous, so if 1 million people could watch videos together, just once per week, is that doable?
Thank you very much. As this is officially time out, I promised time for questions. We will stay here for a second. If you have questions, you can ask us, but we know that the official time for the debate is over. I would like to thank very much our panelists. It was great to have you here. We touched many issues, but we agreed on one thing, that education is the key, the beginning. Maybe it's like an A in the whole alphabet of our steps towards sustainability. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, just off the record, we can Thank you very much. This is for you. Go on with them.